As we move on to the next panel, you would also see a very esteemed panel and a set of industry practitioners who are going to be talking about an additional set of trends that are coming in, whether we are talking about digital and its impact in the manufacturing industry, whether we are looking at being smarter about smart manufacturing, the way that the workers are getting reskilled, and the way that the ways of working are changing. How do we think about sustainability in a new era? What about the government regulations and support, the CHIPS Act that has been signed? These are all the things that are going to be talked about by our panelists in the next session. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our wonderful moderator, Jeff Peters. He is a partner at IBEX Investors, which is a $100+ million fund that's focused on early stage companies. So if there are entrepreneurs in here that are looking for funding in the manufacturing, transportation, and logistics space, you know whom to reach out to. He's got a phenomenal background prior to being involved in the investment space. He's got a PhD in a similar space. He's also built his bones when in high school he was even working on the 1974 Plymouth Duster, and that's how early he was involved in manufacturing. So with that, let me welcome Jeff over to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You guys can hear me. Let's have all the other panelists come up as well, and we can get started. But yeah, as Avanish said, I'm Jeff Peters. IBEX Investors, we have $1 billion under management, and I run a dedicated $100 million fund focused on mobility, which includes manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, so making movement of goods as well as the movement of people with mobility. And I've invested across all sorts of industries, delivering tech and software to these industries like automated robotics and construction, mining, agriculture, as well as most recently within the electric vehicle supply chain, as well as a bunch of software being deployed and selling to manufacturers. So I'm joined by a number of great guests whom I'll introduce, and then we can start a dialogue with everybody. So first, next to me, Jackie Jung. Jackie leads Western Digital's fourth industrial revolution transformation, sustainability, and operation strategy and planning. Jackie's success is demonstrated by leading 5 of Western Digital's advanced manufacturing sites that were named World Economic Forum's 4th Industrial Revolution Lighthouse, so 5 different facilities. And 2 of those lighthouses are also sustainability lighthouses. Jackie serves as a council member for the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council for Advanced Manufacturing and Value Chains, as well as being an executive committee member for the U.S. Center for Advanced Manufacturing. Next to Jackie is Adi. Adi Bhashyam is a group vice president of customer solutions at C3 AI. In this role, he's responsible for technical go-to-market activities, customer engagement, technical qualification, technical and commercial delivery, and professional services across industries and functions globally. Adi leads a team of architects, engineers, delivery leaders, and technology translators that help C3 AI's existing and prospective customers engage with C3.ai solutions to realize value. And finally, we have Chetan. Chetan Gupta heads the Hitachi Industrial AI Lab, leads the Hitachi Global Insights Lab, and co-leads the Global AI Center of Excellence. He has built one of the strongest teams in the area of industrial AI from the ground up, and the team consists of data scientists, architects, and developers building fundamental horizontal technologies for industrial AI, and building solutions for verticals such as mobility, manufacturing, mining, energy management systems, and opening up new frontiers in industrial analytics. Chetan has over 100 papers and patents in the area of industrial AI, data mining, machine learning, data stream systems, complex event processing, and workload management. So we clearly have a group of great experts up here together, so let's try to take advantage of that. So I'll just start off by my personal experience as an investor here in Silicon Valley, investing primarily in software technology. Manufacturing is very hard. The customers can be very slow, difficult to work with, and it's slower growth, generally speaking, than consumer internet, fintech, and selling software to other parts of the enterprise with the SaaS model. Obviously, good reasons for that, but it'd be great to hear from actually, first up, Chetan, maybe you could talk about some specific bottlenecks that exist and what you've done at Hitachi to solve those.
So I'll sort of take a narrower view of the problem from an AI standpoint. So because where we stand, where I sit rather, we've been trying to use AI, machine learning, analytics for manufacturing and in other industrial verticals for quite some time now. And so there are multiple challenges, as you said, right? So, and I think from data to modeling to operationalization, every phase is a challenge. And as you could imagine, very often you don't have enough data in manufacturing, right? Our data collection processes are very legacy. They're mostly from the viewpoint of some statutory requirement or some safety requirement. And you're not collecting data to be able to sort of do machine learning or AI. And that directly leads to a modeling challenge because now you're no longer dealing with big data, but rather you're in the world of small data. And a lot of the innovations recently that you see in deep learning or whatever, right? So those are not directly applicable. And then to overcome that, what you really need to do is incorporate domain knowledge, right? So the operators on the shop floor, the people who fix the machines, the processes, so they have a lot of domain knowledge in their head. And one of the interesting challenges from AI standpoint then becomes, how do you use that? How do you extract that knowledge and make it operationalizable on the field? And then finally, you sort of go to operationalization, and which I think, at least in Silicon Valley, and I speak to a lot of other AI folks as well, we don't understand very well the challenges of operationalizing an AI-like technology in the manufacturing shop floor. Because the cost of making a mistake is very high. So if I'm recommending something to you buy online, right, I recommend a red skirt or a brown skirt, doesn't make much of a difference. But in manufacturing, people can lose their lives. Right? Or in industrial space, people can lose their lives. So because the cost of error can be extremely high, the kind of processes you need to have in place so that AI doesn't sort of goof up is very important. And deciding even which model to operationalize is not straightforward because it's not, typically people think of, oh, I want a very accurate model. Accuracy is not very helpful really when you're really using these models. What you really want to do is ROI. Right? So how do I compute the ROI of this model? And computing ROI is also non-trivial because corporations, you go back to the first problem, corporations haven't collected the data for you to be able to compute ROI. So we are in this sort of cycle of, and that's one of the challenges in manufacturing, besides all the other sort of personnel challenges and organizational and sort of.
Yeah, so many different challenges within an organization. Adi, maybe you could talk about how you deliver that value or try to deliver this ROI to a larger set of external customers. What other challenges have you encountered?
Well, yeah, what I see every day is we're trying to build these systems, just like Chetan mentioned, and deploy them into plants that Jackie's probably run and get them to adopt, right? And there's always a technology adoption play, which is software doesn't work the first time and the second time and the fifth time, and eventually it gets there. Set that aside for a second. I think there's two fundamental issues that kick in, especially when you go into what I would say long-running manufacturing systems and facilities, right? These are not novice operations. They've been going for 30 years, 50 years. People know what they're doing. And the problem we find always is there is a skill mismatch, if you will, or expertise mismatch between people who run the systems and people who build the software to enhance those systems. They're completely in different worlds. And bridging that gap is a huge challenge. And we've had to take some pretty significant steps to try and do that. And that becomes more and more critical as you try and, to Anand's point before, kick up productivity of existing processes and so on. So that's a big issue. The second is adoption and senior executive oversight and sponsorship, right? And once in a while you run into Jackie and she'll say, go do it. Most of the time you run into folks who say, I'm not going to do anything if my plant guy doesn't get it and adopt it himself or herself. And so getting to the point where, I'll give you an example, we had a system that could proactively predict what parts will be late, proactively tell you what you should make today so that you can maximize fill rates of every single order in your order book for the next 7 days on a rolling basis, to maximize revenue and everything else. 20% reduction in inventory, 10% improvement in revenue. No one on the shop floor wanted to use it. They didn't understand it and they didn't trust it. So trust And really driving that is a huge challenge beyond all of the solving the technology bit, which I think we generally can get our heads around.
Yeah, maybe Jackie, you've had wide success and have been recognized and such at Western Digital. Maybe you could talk about Western Digital's journey through some of these obstacles and how you've overcome them.
Sure, we started the journey 9 years ago, right? So given that if we could solve the algorithm issues that Chetan talked, and you talk about system adoptions, that you take the algorithm, you put it into the system, ready to deploy, those are the early stages. And the ones that is the most important, I felt, is the adoptions. So I remember 7 years ago, we said that, well, let's make it big, take the one that's the most important, that give us the most return, which in turn was testing, right? We make high precision components. We want it to be reliable. It takes hundreds of hours to test it, and we know many parts are perfectly fine. So if we could figure out a drive is totally good, then we could have reduced testing. So I remember we developed this algorithm, it was ready to deploy, 15% test time reductions, and it stalled because the engineer said that, well, I don't understand the algorithm. I have a 2,000 parameter, you said this 150 is important. I don't know how the algorithm works, I'm not ready to do it. But we said, well, I gone through all the reliability tests, right? So how are we gonna move forward? I remember at the time, I went to the VP of deployment, I said that, hey, Philip, nobody gonna remember you. A couple years later, you make a 1 or 2% improvement. That's your do job. People are gonna remember you that you are the first factory to do machine learning testing. And that was the tipping point. So we made the algorithm, we deployed it, 15% test time reduction, millions of dollars of test capex. That's saved, and that was the tipping point. I feel that that was a big win, the tipping point, and since then, we have deployed machine learning in predictive maintenance, looking at features for quality improvement, looking at yield improvement. So 2 years ago, we were looking at, well, we've done all these, is this world-class? What does world-class means? So we found the World Economic Forum has a program called Lighthouse that rewarded factories that are at the forefront of the fourth industrial revolution. The success rate is only 3%. I said, well, we still need to go because we need to find out, right, what is world-class. So a couple of years later, we have 5 lighthouses, and 2 of them are sustainability lighthouses. So I remember I went back to the VP, I said, Philip, now you are the first lighthouse in Thailand. I spent 5 years in Asia working with the factory. I feel that, I bring people along, they feel extremely proud. First lighthouse in Malaysia and first lighthouse in Thailand, and that's how you have stakeholder engagement and you bring people along with you.
Yeah. A fantastic story. So I think we heard a little bit of the data algorithm problems, a lot of the stakeholder problems, and so driving specific ROI. And I think that's the same case for entrepreneurs as well. Going to these large organizations is clearly communicating that, finding champions who are willing to deploy this and aligning those incentives. So for all the entrepreneurs out there looking at this space, it's becoming a more attractive area to invest in, start companies, and deliver value, since there's a lot more champions in the space that are seeing ROI, and that evidence can snowball into a bigger opportunity. But let's take a step back and talk about some of the larger trends here. Obviously, we talked about COVID here, and I think that really showed how important manufacturing and supply chain is in the economy. It touched all of our lives viscerally there. So I think, and then also we see like big legislative pushes here in the US for reshoring, incentives for the CHIPS Act, IRA, a number of other incentives to bring back manufacturing. Some of these bottlenecks have been solved. Where are the problems emerging? Where are the most interesting problems to look at within your own organizations? And maybe we can start again with Chetan at the end.
So from a broader supply chain perspective, I think what we are looking at are 3 things. Sustainability of supply chains, that's becoming very important, especially post-COVID resilience of supply chain. So you don't want to be dependent on any one particular vendor or one particular choke point in your supply chain. And the third one is around circularity. I think someone mentioned recycling something. So I think, given this sort of audiences around entrepreneurship, I would say all these three areas are ripe for innovation. So these are some fundamental hard problems in both sustainable, especially in resilience, right? How do you design supply chains which are resilient? Traditionally, most supply chain software has focused on inventory management to reduce your cost of inventory. So, but how do you now have a dual mandate where not only do you have to control for your cost of inventory, but as well as make some resilience. And the moment you add resilience, you're adding some cost to your supply chain. And then how do you trade off between that cost that you're adding versus, how do you justify that to a stakeholder saying, look, this is a probability of X event happening. And based on that, what is the expected return of this additional investment that you have to make in resilience? So that, I think, is sort of an interesting place to look at. The other place to look at, which I think is somewhat understudied, is around circularity. So in battery space, people understand circularity to some extent, right? So because there are some precious material within the battery space, and people now want to extend the life of battery. But even in, say, manufacturing, remanufacturing, right? Most automotive parts today are remanufactured when you go to get your car fixed after the warranty period is out. And so there are a lot of very open problems from an AI machine learning perspective, right? Because traditional manufacturing is standard quality of input, which is your raw material, and then your very standard manufacturing processes. The moment you're doing remanufacturing, you're collecting sort of used parts, and you're trying to remanufacture them to get something else. And the whole, whatever you have learned about lean manufacturing, about how to optimize for quality in manufacturing, all that has to be rethought. And that is one space where AI machine learning can play a significant role in reducing the cost of remanufacturing. So I think these are some of the broader trends that I see. And that's where at least we are investing as Hitachi in terms of AI cross supply chain management.
Yeah, I want to echo. I think the challenge is also exciting things. The challenge is about sustainability. So in COPs 26, 27, we talk about commitment to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees C. We are moving this commitment to actual actions, right? So number one is how can you operate manufacturing with least number of emissions? And that is actually an advantage for reshoring because the availability of abundant renewable energy in the US is an advantage for us. So that is number one. And a lot of company has committed to science-based target. We set the goal to 2030, 2050, that net zero. This is a big paradigm shift and new KPI. After the emission, then we're talking about how do you manage water, how do you manage waste, how do you have the least water withdrawn, and water scarcity is becoming a problem also. How do you reduce weight? Circular economy, how do you reuse, recycle, and end-of-life extension? I think these are all challenges, and we are lacking talent in this area. The other one is workforce. How do you bring the workforce to the new set of skills? We talk about computer vision is replacing the manual inspections, right? Algorithm is helping a process engineer to arrive at a process recipe a lot faster. So the skill set that's needed for the next level of manufacturing is greatly lacking here.
And I'll build on both these, which I wholeheartedly agree with. One thing we're seeing with reshoring and an increase in manufacturing in, say, the US or other places, is talent retiring. So people that actually know these systems are no longer working in these places or are about to retire. And folks that are coming in, firstly, there's not too many of them because there's 2 jobs, not 20. And those 2 people that have just joined don't know how these systems really work at I can put my hand on the paper machine and I know if it's working or not kind of level, right? And I think that level of deep expertise is a challenge. People are struggling with how they replace and solve for that. There are some solutions that we're trying now, but including generative AI and all of that, and we'll go from there. The other thing that I think is an opportunity, and I think a very real one, is unlike, for instance, the separation here between a manufacturing track and a supply chain track, it's all one thing, and it's not planned once a month. It's continuously agile. And so this idea that you can plan out how much you're going to make 6 weeks in advance, ship that plan over in an Excel spreadsheet, and then work through it is dying a very rapid death, which means this idea of manufacturing supply chain are colliding very quickly. And so you need the ability to do sort of this idea of continuous simulation or continuous planning. The third, and it goes to materials and a few other areas, is a lot of investment and a lot of conversations, at least I'm seeing, related to virtual laboratories. So I do tests. It takes me a long time to do a test, right? But I need to make a decision quickly. Can I get a pass-fail in 5 minutes and then do the long test later? Right? And that applies to quick things like inspections. It applies to biopharma manufacturing, where I need to look at parameters of the bioreactor to see if a batch will fail or not. That's all I care about, as opposed to like tuning yield and so on and so forth. And I think we're seeing a lot more interest in those areas. So those are three, in addition to sustainability and everything else, are sort of pretty hot.
I completely agree. Yeah. I think it reminds me of a certain, because someone mentioned kids going to high school and then going to college and doing computer science. Given what's happening in generative AI, I'm not sure that's the right idea. Maybe we should train your kids to go to manufacturing. Those will be the jobs of the future.
Yeah, that's great. So we have to, push people or recognize that this is a real serious industry that really, again, touches all of our lives. When it comes to, some of these trends or problems that are emerging, what do you guys see as the big moonshots out there? Obviously, we're trying to foster entrepreneurship here. Where should entrepreneurs be skating towards and solving problems, after high school, and they decide to go after manufacturing versus generative AI? What should people be looking at over the next 10 years?
All of these 10x areas, and I think if you're building a brand new business, there are areas of growth that are obvious there. As it relates to enhancing solutions, I think this idea of generative AI, as it relates to like, can you finish my homework, is very cool. It will die its hype cycle in about 2 months, and then we'll have to actually do something useful with it. What we're seeing is starting to get interesting is, imagine pointing those large language models along with maintenance data, along with equipment hierarchies, along with asset and process information, and using the large language models to train a new interface. Imagine Google search for what's going to fail tomorrow. What equipment should I go inspect today? Right? When was the last time we repaired this thing, and is it time for a renewal? Right? I have the OEM coming in tomorrow. What pieces of equipment should they look at? Right? That's where we see at least opportunities to really take generative AI to make it useful in a manufacturing setting, and similarly in supply chain, and similarly in other places. The other place is very crudely wargaming for supply chain. Right? Okay, I may not be able to rely on my Taiwan supply chain for the next 6 months. I still have to ship product. What can I do? Right? And being able to simulate that at a order, shipment, part, demand perspective globally is a pretty big deal. And I think it's going to get pretty creative. The third, I think, is this everlasting promise of scope 3 emissions and tied to circularity and sustainability, which is a great idea. It's very hard to actually operationalize. And I think and I think, Jackie, you probably have far more experience on this hands-on.
Sure. I think that the big opportunity for us is elevate the purpose of manufacturing, right? In the pandemic, we saw that we don't get toilet paper, we can't get masks, we don't get electronics that goes into the car. We have to let the future generation understand manufacturing is the fundamental of the economy, and we need to put emphasis on that. Now, how do we go forward? Number one, we have to build resilience in the manufacturing. So, for example, using technology to sense risks. Can we predict the demand? How can we optimize the supply chain? That is one area about a resilient supply chain and manufacturing. The other one is how can we do it responsibly in a sustainable manner, whether it's from the environment, from the water, from the waste, from the emissions. That is the second pillar that I think. The last one is that we got to bring people along. The globalizations and the automations displaces quite a bit of jobs that people are not equipped with the skill. In this revolution, when we bring up manufacturing, when we think about resilience, sustainability, we should think about inclusivity. For example, think about, I just want to think about two things, right? We have, why we don't have women in the manufacturing? Because we have a very archaic operation principle. A shift is 12 hours, and the women cannot work 12 hours because they have to take care of the kids. Now, how can we use algorithm? Can we use optimization? And if you can come in this 4 hours, and we're not thinking that you need to really hard labor to work on an operation, you can sit in a control room. We can enable women, more women in the manufacturing space. People who are disabled, they could not go on the shop floor, but there's no shop floor anymore. It's in the control room, right? And can we have more of these people in the manufacturing? So I think we need to take manufacturing up a level, give a higher level of purpose, and telling people that you can use technology, use your authentic intelligence, and you are serving the greater good for the people. That's what I think the North Star is.
So I would sort of say pick two things that I see are important. So one is a lot of work is going on materials research. And this is sort of fundamental research in terms of how do you design materials that are more resilient or can be recycled or can be reused. So at least from and as related to manufacturing processes, right? Certain materials lend themselves to manufacturing processes. Certain materials don't, right? So this intersection of materials and manufacturing, I think, is going to be a very, very interesting area for people to look at. And this is, again, one place where entrepreneurs can look at. The other thing is we still don't have tools on the shop floor that make it very intuitive for people to do maintenance, to do operations, recommendation tools, right? Something you said earlier around, your things about generative AI, building interfaces so that you can answer these questions, right? OEM is coming tomorrow. What equipment should I maintain? But before you can even go there, you need to be able to extract knowledge systematically from your distributed data sources in a manufacturing setting and be able to build models that can answer those questions. So there is, I think, a large potential to come up with easy to intuitive interfaces and apps that help people to do their daily job in a much more efficient way. That is the expectation, right? Because these people, when they go home, they're using an iPad or iPhone for their social response, whatever it is, right? But when they come back to manufacturing, they're in sort of a previous generation of interfaces. So this is a very interesting sort of space for folks to look at. I think those two come to mind.
Yeah, I'll put you guys all on the spot here since we didn't talk about it beforehand, but we're talking about fostering entrepreneurship and the digitalization of manufacturing. If you could start a company today, what would it do?
So I think first thing, from a Silicon Valley standpoint, we need to understand in manufacturing, you can't move fast and break things. So that's lesson number one. Once you've learned that, as I said, so that's where what it really means from practical standpoint is where our manufacturing systems are today. Unless you're using control technology, you still will have human in the loop. You can't have completely automated systems unless they're very narrow, right? If you think of robotics, use of robots in manufacturing, they're in a very confined space, right? So because you're restricting both the input that they get and the output that they get. Oh, okay. So from a broader standpoint, I think what you need to really think about is can you build applications that empower the humans who are operating these machines, who are fixing these machines, who are taking the supply chain decisions, give them a very sort of good user experience and empower them to make the right decisions very quickly. And that is where I would work.
I'll go back to what I know, and I think the piece that kind of ties these threads together is a little bit of, if I could build a company that could look at any manufacturing setup that understands inputs, outputs, and things like circularity, sustainability, footprint, the question becomes, what do I make today? what do I make today? How do I present that to a shop floor that understands what to do and can do it? That balances then things like risk, sustainability, circularity, etc., on an ongoing and regular basis. And if you crack that at the daily problem, you then scale that up.
I think that I would want to see a company who will focus on sustainability, whether it's measuring energy consumption from the equipment, measuring water usage from your utilities and waste. This is a huge opportunity that a new set of KPI is being put forth in front of us, and we don't have basic data analyses on that. So I think that's something that is a huge opportunity, because 10 years from now, it's going to be a table stake. It's going to be companies who are responsible and sustainable will be advantaged.
Great, thanks. And we're here again for...
Just to add to that,
sure.
Typically it's been called manufacturing to zero. So you can look it up. So zero emissions, zero waste.
Zero water.
Zero water. Right?
Zero water.
Zero water withdrawal.
That's a big space to be.
Yeah, so thanks for those insights. And if there's entrepreneurs in the crowd, some of the best investments I've made have great founder market fit, where you have great tech and folks with subject matter expertise. So find these guys later if you'd like to chat more with them. With that, we'll wrap up the panel, but I think all of us will be available to chat throughout the day. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.